I told myself I was only going up there for the view. The mountain trail was supposed to be marked, simple, even boring according to the old map I downloaded before leaving the valley road. But the higher I climbed, the more the world started to feel edited. Trees stood too still, like they were listening. The fog didn't move with the wind. It moved against it, curling inward whenever I stepped forward, like it was trying to keep something hidden from me. My phone lost signal at exactly 6:17 p.m. I remember that detail because I checked it 3 times, as if repetition could fix it. After that, the silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It had weight, a pressure behind my ears, a faint humming that didn't belong to anything alive I knew. Then I saw the first structure, a wooden sign nailed to a tree, half swallowed by moss. It had a name carved into it that looked freshly scratched, even though everything around it was old, too old. The name matched mine. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, matching mine perfectly 1 second delayed. I didn't turn around right away, because deep down I already knew whatever was following me up this mountain had been here long before I arrived. And that's when I saw it. The morning air was cold enough to sting my throat as I stepped onto the mountain trail. Early light spilled through thin clouds, pale and quiet, touching wet leaves and stone. Everything felt still in a way that didn't belong to nature. Even the wind moved like it was thinking before it passed me. My boots pressed into soft dirt. Each step left a mark that looked normal at first. I kept walking, following the narrow path that was supposed to lead upward to the ridge. But something behind me shifted. I stopped, looked back slowly. The trail I had just walked on was no longer the same shape. It bent slightly to the left now, curling around a tree that hadn't been in my way before. My breath tightened, shallow and cold in my chest. The trees stood too close together, not growing, but positioned, like someone had placed them there carefully while I wasn't watching. I turned forward again. The path ahead looked fine, normal, safe, familiar, but it didn't stay that way for long. I checked my map. Paper, folded thin, damp at the edges from morning mist. The route was clear just minutes ago. Now new ink lines were appearing. Slowly, not drawn by me. They formed themselves, dark strokes crawling across the paper like something alive underneath it. The path ahead changed shape on the map. Even though my eyes told me nothing had moved, a new route appeared, one I had never seen before. It curved deeper into the forest, away from a ridge I was supposed to reach. And at the top of that new line, my name was faintly written. My hands started shaking. The air around me felt tighter, like the mountain had leaned in closer. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, distant, almost gentle. It came from ahead of me. My name. I froze. The sound didn't echo like normal speech. It didn't bounce through trees or air. It just existed, right inside the silence. I turned slowly. Nothing, only fog moving between trunks, pale and slow like breath from something sleeping underground. Then, behind me, same voice, same tone, but closer. I turned again. Still nothing, only the trail I had already walked, except it wasn't the same anymore. The dirt looked freshly pressed, as if someone had just walked it moments after me. But the steps were wrong. Too long, too perfectly aligned. Matching mine, but not quite. I started walking again, faster this time. The forest grew quieter with every step I took forward. Even the birds had stopped. Even the wind had gone still, like it was waiting for something to finish. My map shifted again. New lines formed, faster now, like it had stopped hesitating, like it had decided where I was going before I could. The trail ahead split into 2 paths. I had not seen the split before. I was certain of that. One path led upward toward light. The other dipped into thick trees where the fog was heavier, almost black at its edges. I chose the upward one, but the ground beneath me disagreed. The path changed shape as I stepped forward. Not instantly, not violently, slowly, like it was correcting me. The upward path faded behind me. The darker one solidified under my feet, as if it had always been the only choice. My chest tightened. I stopped again, looked around. The forest felt closer now. trees leaning in slightly, trunks angled in ways that made no sense when I tried to follow them with my eyes. And then I noticed it. A tree in my left had moved, not by growing, not by falling. It had simply shifted position while I wasn't looking directly at it. I looked away immediately, then looked back. It was closer. I stepped backward. A branch creaked above me, slow and deliberate. I didn't see it move, but I felt it change, like the forest had just adjusted its posture. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't ahead or behind. It was everywhere. My name, from the trees, from the fog, from the ground beneath my boots. My breathing turned uneven. Cold air burned my lungs. The map in my hand crumpled slightly on its own. New ink was forming again, faster. The route was no longer a path. It was a loop, circling me, guiding me without letting me leave. I dropped the map. It didn't fall properly. It floated down too slowly, like the air was resisting gravity just for it. When it hit the ground, the ink was still moving, still drawing, still correcting. I backed away. The forest behind me shifted. The path I had walked on earlier was gone. Not hidden, not blocked, removed, as if it had never existed. My stomach dropped. I turned in a slow circle. Every direction looked the same now. Trees, fog, silence, except for the path beneath my feet. It was the only thing that remained stable, because it had decided where I was going. Not me. I stopped trying to choose. That's when I realized something worse. The forest wasn't chasing me. It wasn't attacking. It was adjusting, fixing. Every step I took, every hesitation, every turn I tried to make, it responded like a system correcting an error. And I was the error. A branch snapped softly behind me. I didn't look this time, because I already knew what I would see. Something had changed position again, and it would keep changing until I stopped noticing. Or until I became part of the correction too. The voice returned one last time. Closer now, not behind me, not ahead, inside the silence between my thoughts. My name, and for the first time, it didn't feel like it was calling me. It felt like it already knew exactly where I would end up. The air was colder than it should have been for mid-morning. Mist hung low between the trees, pale and heavy, brushing against my face like damp cloth. The mountain trail narrowed here, squeezed between dark trunks and uneven stone. Everything felt quiet in a way that made each step sound too loud inside my own head. I remember thinking I had walked this section before, but I couldn't place when. Then I saw it. A wooden hut stood in the clearing ahead. Still, perfect, wrong. I stopped, so suddenly my breath caught in my throat. It hadn't been there yesterday. I was certain of that. The clearing itself felt familiar, like an empty space I had passed without noticing. Now it was filled as if something had been waiting for me to forget it first. Smoke drifted from the chimney, thin, gray, soft, but there was no smell of firewood, no crackle, no heat, just smoke behaving like a memory of fire. My boots pressed into wet grass as I moved closer. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the ground was slightly resisting me. The wooden walls of the hut were aged, darkened by rain and time, but the wood looked recently touched. Fresh scratches ran along the doorframe, as if someone had traced patterns there not long ago. I reached the door. It was already slightly open. A thin line of warm air slipped out through the gap. Not heat, just warmth. Like breath, I pushed it open. The inside was still, too still. A small table sat in the center. On it, a cup of tea. Steam rose gently from it. Fresh, impossible. My fingers went cold instantly. The room smelled faintly of damp wood and something familiar I couldn't place, like a place I had once known but forgotten. A chair sat pulled out, as if someone had just stood up, but no one was here. I stepped inside slowly. The floor creaked under my weight. That sound felt too real in contrast to everything else. On the table, beside the tea, lay a journal, old leather cover, soft edges, slightly worn. My hand reached for it before I decided to move. It felt warm, not from heat, from use, as if it had been held recently. I opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting. My handwriting. I recognized the tilt of the letters immediately, but I don't remember writing any of it. Page after page described the mountain, the trail, the fog, the shifting trees. My stomach tightened as I read faster. Some entries described moments I had not yet experienced. Others described thoughts I was only now having. Then I reached the final page. The ink was darker here, fresh, like it had been written moments before I arrived. My eyes locked onto words. Don't trust the version of you that arrives later. I felt my throat go dry. The hut creaked softly around me, but there was no wind, only the faint sound of something settling, like the structure had just finished becoming real. I turned toward the window. Fog pressed against the glass from outside, thick and slow-moving. But my reflection didn't look right. It stood a fraction too still, watching me, not copying me, waiting. I blinked hard. The reflection matched me again. Normal. Almost. A soft clink came from behind me. I turned quickly. The teacup had moved slightly closer to the edge of the table. Not falling, not spilling, just shifting, like it was being repositioned. I stepped back. The chair behind me scraped faintly across the floor. I hadn't touched it. The journal on the table flipped one page on its own. Slow, careful. The new page was blank. For a moment, then ink began to form. Letters crawling up from the paper, like they were being remembered instead of written. My name appeared at the top, followed by a sentence I didn't want to finish reading. The hut felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air heavier, like the space inside was adjusting to contain me properly. I moved toward the door, but it didn't look the same anymore. The frame seemed narrower, or maybe I had changed. Behind me, the chair was no longer empty. For just a second, I thought I saw movement. Not a person, not fully, just a suggestion of someone sitting where no one should be. I blinked. It was gone. The teacup was empty now. No steam, no warmth, only a faint ring of moisture left behind on the table, as if it had been drunk. I reached the door handle. My hand stopped halfway, because I realized something. The hut was no longer behind me. It was around me, and I couldn't remember stepping outside. Fog rolled to the valley like slow-moving breath, thick enough to swallow the edges of the trail. Morning light barely touched the ground here, turning everything into soft gray outlines. The air was damp, cold against my skin, settling into my clothes like something unwanted but patient. I kept walking anyway. The mountain path was still visible, but only just. Every few steps, it disappeared into mist and had to be found again. That's when I noticed a shape, a shadow, not mine. It moved slightly behind me, matching my pace. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, light bending, distance playing games. But it didn't drift like fog does. It followed. Exactly. I stopped. The shadow stopped a half second later. I turned slowly. Nothing stood behind me. Only fog. Thick. Quiet. Waiting. I turned forward again. The shadow kept walking. I didn't move, but it did. One step. Then another. A perfect delay behind my own actions. My breath tightened. I forced myself to walk again. The shadow followed instantly, but always just slightly off. Never wrong enough to notice immediately. Never close enough to ignore. The fog grew denser as I continued. Sound softened until even my footsteps felt distant. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Close. Behind me. I stopped again. The breathing stopped a fraction later. I turned sharply. Nothing. But now the air felt warmer in one direction, like something had just leaned away. I started walking faster. The shadow matched. The breathing returned. Now it was syncing with mine. In, out, in, out. Too perfect, then slightly off, like it was learning me. I tried to control my breathing. Slow it, change it. The shadow followed the adjustment instantly. Too instantly. That's when I understood. It wasn't copying me. It was anticipating me. The fog shifted strangely ahead, revealing shapes that looked like trees but didn't behave like them. They stood too still, like they were watching through absence. The breathing behind me became uneven. It tried to match again. Failed, then corrected. My chest tightened. Something was getting better at being me than I was. I stopped abruptly. The shadow didn't stop on time. It took one more step forward than I did, and kept going, just for a moment, walking ahead without me. I turned fully now. The fog behind me was empty again, but the ground told a different story. Footsteps continued forward in the mist. Mine, but not mine, moving without me. A cold pressure settled in my stomach. I stepped backward. The footsteps stopped. The shadow returned to its position behind me, half a second delayed. Like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just seen it walk away. The breathing changed again. Now it was closer, inside my rhythm, not behind me, inside it, matching perfectly. Then slightly ahead, my thoughts slowed. The fog thickened until even distance felt unreliable. The shadow was no longer just following. It was aligning, testing, correcting. The forest ahead bent subtly, like the trail itself was being rewritten based on my hesitation. Every choice I made, it reacted before I finished making it. I realized something I didn't want to accept. There wasn't one of me here. There were two systems running at once. One visible, one learning. The shadow stepped forward again. I didn't move. It kept going. And this time, it didn't stop when I did. It continued walking into the fog ahead. My breath stopped. For a second, I heard myself breathing somewhere in front of me, where I wasn't. I turned slowly. The fog there was darker, denser, and for the first time, it felt like something was walking back toward me. Not copying anymore. Not following. Becoming. The mountain air was strangely still, as if the wind had forgotten this part of the forest. I walked deeper into a narrow path where the trees leaned inward, their branches tangled like old fingers holding secrets. The ground was uneven, soft in places, hard in others, like the earth couldn't decide what it wanted to be. That's when I saw the bell. It hung from a dead branch high above a trail, rusted and dark, swaying slightly even though nothing touched it. There was no rope connected to it, no visible support, just a bell, suspended in a way that didn't feel natural. I stopped walking without meaning to. The forest around me stayed silent. Then the bell rang. A single, clear tone cut through the stillness. No wind, no movement, just sound appearing in the air like a thought that didn't belong to me. I stepped forward. The bell rang again. I froze. Something inside my mind shifted slightly, like a page turning that I didn't remember reading. A memory blurred the edges, softening like wet ink. I tried to grasp it, but it slipped away before I could name it. The forest felt closer now, trees leaning in a fraction more. I took another step. The bell rang. Another memory faded. Not gone, but distant, like a voice heard through water. My childhood came to mind, but only pieces. A field, a house, a feeling of warmth I couldn't fully touch anymore. I swallowed hard and stepped back. The bell stayed silent. The forest didn't. It felt like it was waiting. So I moved again. The bell rang immediately. This time, something sharper disappeared from my mind. A name, someone important. I tried to hold on to it, but it dissolved before I could anchor it. My chest tightened. Each step forward cost me something I couldn't measure. The forest began to feel familiar, too familiar, as if I had walked here before. Not once, many times. The trees no longer felt strange. They felt known. The bell rang again when I hesitated. A childhood memory flickered and went dark. I couldn't even tell what it was anymore. Only the feeling remained, lost without object. I stopped completely. Silence stretched. Then I realized something worse. I didn't know why I had stopped. The forest felt like home now, not in a comforting way, in a forgotten way, like returning somewhere I had always belonged but never understood. The bell did not ring, because I wasn't moving. I turned slowly, tried to find the path I came from, but the forest behind me didn't look like behind me anymore. It looked like forward. I tried to remember how I arrived here. Nothing came, only blank space where direction should have been. The bell rang again. Even though I hadn't moved, another memory faded. This one hurt less, because I couldn't remember what it was in the first place. That frightened me more than anything else. The idea that I was already losing pieces without noticing. The forest breathed softly around me, branches shifting in slow, almost careful movements, like something was adjusting its understanding of me. I started walking again, without deciding to. The bell rang immediately, but this time I didn't react the same way. Something inside me had already softened, already loosened. I could feel myself becoming lighter in a way that wasn't freedom. It was absence. The path ahead no longer felt unknown. It felt expected. The bell rang again. I tried to remember my name. There was a pause inside my mind. Too long. Then it returned, slightly wrong, as if it had been rewritten and I hadn't noticed. The forest felt closer still. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I had ever been anywhere else. The trail opened into a wide clearing just as the light began to fade. The sky above the mountain had turned pale, drained of color, like the day itself was forgetting how to continue. My legs ached from hours of walking, each step heavier than the last, as if the ground had slowly been learning my weight and adapting to it. I hadn't planned to stop here, but the moment I entered the clearing, I felt something change. The air was warmer. Not naturally, it felt prepared. A campsite was already there. I stopped so quickly my breath caught. A small fire burned in the center of the clearing, steady and calm, as if it had been waiting through silence. No smoke drifted away from it properly. It curled upward and then vanished too early, like it didn't want to leave the space above the flames. The ground around the fire was arranged neatly, logs placed in a circle, tools laid out with intention, and a sleeping bag, already unrolled, shaped, not just placed, formed, like it was waiting for a body it already knew. Mine. I didn't move at first. The forest behind me stayed silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Only the quiet presence of something that felt like expectation. I stepped closer. The fire crackled softly, but the sound felt distant, like it wasn't happening in the same layer of reality as me. A cup sat beside the logs. Steam rose from it slowly. Fresh. Impossible. I reached out without thinking, then stopped. The air above the campsite felt slightly warmer near my hand, as if it recognized intention. Whispers moved through the clearing, not words at first, just rhythm, like conversations continuing after I had already arrived late to them. I couldn't understand them fully, but they sounded familiar, too familiar, as if I had heard them before I even reached this place. I stepped back. The fire dimmed slightly, not extinguishing, adjusting, like it was reacting to distance. I turned slowly, expecting the forest to feel different behind me. It didn't. It felt unchanged, which was worse, because the campsite felt like the only thing that had ever been real. I tried to leave the clearing. I took one step back toward the trail. The moment my foot crossed the edge of the campsite, the fire flickered. The sleeping bag shifted slightly, not violently, not noticeably at first, but enough. When I looked again, the campsite was reset. Fire steady, logs aligned, cup full again, sleeping bag perfectly shaped, like I had never attempted to leave. My throat tightened. I stepped forward again. Everything returned instantly, as if the space had been waiting for my decision and correcting it before I fully made it. The whispers grew clearer now, still not words, but patterns, speech shaped like memory, like fragments of conversations I couldn't place in time. Some of them sounded like me, but I didn't remember saying them. I moved toward the sleeping bag, slowly. The fabric looked warm, even from a distance, like it had been holding heat for a long time, waiting patiently for return. The firelight shifted softly across it, revealing folds that matched my shape too precisely to be accidental. I backed away again. The campsite did not change this time. It waited, patient, certain. The whispers stopped. Silence settled over the clearing. Then my name came from the fire, not spoken, not shouted, just present, inside the warmth, inside the light. I turned toward the trail again. It was still there, but it no longer felt like an exit. It felt like a loop I had already failed to complete. And the campsite behind me felt like the only place the mountains still remember me correctly. Snow covered the upper trail, even though it shouldn't have been this cold yet. The higher I climbed, The quieter everything became, as if the mountain was slowly removing noise from the world one layer at a time. My breath came out in soft white bursts, vanishing almost immediately into the pale air. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Mine, but not only mine. A second set walked beside me, matching every step with impossible precision. I stopped. The print stopped a fraction later. I looked down again. The second set didn't just follow. It mirrored, perfectly spaced, perfectly timed, as if something invisible was learning my rhythm and refusing to break it. I turned slowly. Nothing stood behind me, only white silence and falling frost. I took one step forward. The second set took two. My chest tightened. I stepped again. The second prints moved slightly ahead of mine now, as if impatient. Then they stopped when I did, like they were correcting themselves. I walked faster. The second footprints kept pace effortlessly, sometimes overtaking me, sometimes falling back, but never breaking formation. The snow beneath them compressed cleanly, sharply, as if pressed by something real, something present. I stopped abruptly. The second prints continued forward, just for a moment, walking without me. My breath caught. The forest ahead looked unchanged, but now it felt like it was moving without permission. I stepped backward. The second prints stopped instantly, returned beside mine, perfect alignment restored, as if nothing had ever happened. The silence grew heavier. Even the wind felt distant now, like it was observing from another layer of the mountain. I tried changing pace again, slow steps, then fast. The second prints adapted instantly, not reacting, anticipating. That's when I understood something I didn't want to think about. It wasn't following me. It was synchronizing with me, like a reflection that had learned how to exist independently. I looked down at my boots again. One step, two sets of impact, but only one body. The snow felt colder under the second set. Even though I couldn't see anything there, my skin prickled. I stopped completely. The second print stopped, but this time they didn't disappear. They stayed, waiting, like they had already decided where I would go next. I found the cave by accident, half hidden behind a curtain of rock and frozen vines. The air inside was warmer, stale, carrying the smell of damp stone and something metallic I couldn't name. My footsteps echoed in soft delays, like the cave was thinking before it responded. Deep inside there was a radio, old, rusted, sitting on a flat stone like it had always belonged there. I didn't remember bringing it, but it turned on when I got close. A burst of static filled the cave, then breathing, slow, close, human, but wrong in timing. I stepped back immediately. The breathing matched me. Inhale when I inhaled, exhale when I exhaled. Perfectly, until it didn't. It began to drift, half a second off, then a full second, like something was learning to breathe outside my rhythm. My throat tightened. I turned the dial. Nothing changed. The breathing continued through static, steady and patient, like it had no intention of stopping. Then a voice broke through. Soft, not loud, too calm. It whispered numbers, coordinates. I didn't recognize them, but my body reacted anyway, as if it did. I stepped outside the cave. The signal didn't weaken. It followed, stronger now. The radio crackled in my hands, even when I wasn't holding it. Breathing continued between bursts of static. And now, it wasn't just matching me. It was ahead of me, breathing before I did. I stopped walking. The radio spoke before I moved, whispered a direction I hadn't chosen yet. I froze. The cave behind me stayed silent, but the radio didn't. It kept predicting. Each next step, each pause, each hesitation I hadn't made yet. My stomach tightened. I dropped it. It hit the ground softly, but the sound came through the radio a second before impact. The cliff opened wide at the edge of the mountain, dropping into a vast emptiness of fog and stone. Wind moved through it in slow, broken waves, carrying fragments of sound that didn't belong to any single direction. The air here felt stretched thin, like it was being pulled apart by something unseen. I shouted once, just to hear something real. My voice disappeared into the void. Then came the echo, but it wasn't mine. It answered too quickly, and it was wrong. The words came back slightly altered, like someone had reshaped them before returning them. I tried again. The echo responded with a sentence I never said. My breath slowed. The cliff face itself seemed to shift subtly, stone patterns rearranging like muscle under skin. Faces began forming in the rock. Not clear, not solid, just suggestions of expression. Watching, listening, I stepped closer. The echo returned again, and this time it used a name I didn't recognize, but my body reacted to it, like it was mine. A strange pull formed in my chest, confusion without reason. The cliff wasn't reflecting me. It was completing me. I shouted again. The echo came back softer, almost gentle, like reassurance, but it still wasn't correct. It was becoming more structured, more deliberate, like the cliff was learning how conversation worked. I stepped back. The faces in the stone shifted slightly. One of them looked almost like mine, but older, or wrong in ways I couldn't explain. The echo came again, and now it sounded like a dialogue, not repetition. Conversation, between me and something else using my voice incorrectly. The cabin appeared without transition. One moment, open trail. The next, wooden walls surrounding me. No sound of arrival, no sensation of entry. Just inside. The air was tight, still, pressed against my skin like the room had been waiting too long. There were no doors, no windows, only walls that looked complete from every angle. I turned slowly. Nothing changed. A table stood in the center. A clock ticked softly beside it, but the sound felt uneven, like time was being counted incorrectly. I stepped closer. The clock moved backward for 1 second, then forward again. Uncertain. Each tick felt heavier than the last, as if something was being removed from inside me piece by piece. I couldn't tell what, but I felt the loss. The objects inside the cabin shifted slightly when I looked away. A chair moved, a book opened, a cup filled with something I didn't pour. Every time I turned my head, reality adjusted itself, not breaking, correcting. The clock continued counting, but the direction no longer made sense. Forward became optional. Backward felt expected. My certainty began to thin, like fog inside my thoughts. I tried to find an exit. There was none, only repetition of walls. Same with grain, same silence, same pressure being observed without eyes. The cabin felt like it was becoming smaller the longer I stayed still. Or maybe I was becoming larger inside it. The clock ticked again. Something inside me softened. A thought disappeared before I could finish it. I didn't remember what it was, but I knew I needed it. The cabin remained silent, waiting for the next piece to fall away. The wind arrived without warning at the ridge, sweeping across the mountain in long, broken currents. It didn't feel like air moving. It felt like something speaking through pressure and distance, shaping itself between trees and stone. At first, I thought I heard words inside it, but they weren't forward. They were backward, reverse time hiding inside breath. A warning came before the moment it described. I heard myself scream before anything happened. My body reacted late. Too late. The wind already knew. The mountain already knew. Everything felt slightly ahead of me, like reality was no longer unfolding in real time, but replaying something already decided. I tried to move forward. The wind stopped me, not physically, but completely, like permission had been withdrawn. I waited. The wind shifted again, and I moved only when allowed it. Each step felt approved before it happened. Each hesitation corrected before I made it. I was no longer choosing direction. I was being placed into it. The mountain stretched ahead, silent and absolute, as if it had already written everything I was about to do, and was simply waiting for me to catch up to it. The lake appeared without warning between the trees, stretched wide and silent beneath a sky that felt too pale to be real. The surface looked frozen at first glance, smooth like glass, reflecting the world in a way that made everything feel slightly delayed. The air here was colder, sharper, as if it had been stripped of warmth long ago and never allowed to recover. I stepped closer. The ice didn't crack. It didn't even respond. It simply waited. My reflection appeared on the surface. But something was wrong immediately. It moved a fraction too late, like it was remember my actions instead of copying them. I lifted my hand slowly. The reflection hesitated, then followed, but not perfectly. Behind me, the trees bent slightly in the water's reflection, forming shapes that didn't exist above the surface. I leaned closer, breath fog in the air just above the lake. Something beneath the ice moved, not breaking through, just shifting, like it was learning the shape of living things from underneath. I stepped back. My reflection didn't. It stayed there, watching, still, waiting. Then it smiled a second too late. I turned away fast. The forest behind me felt normal again, but only for a moment. The lake remained in my mind like a pressure I couldn't release. Every step I took away from it felt heavier, like I was leaving something unfinished behind. Then I noticed something worse. My reflection was still on the lake, even though I wasn't looking at it. It was standing there, facing forward, not moving, but present. I stopped walking. From behind the ice, something tapped once, soft, measured, like a response. The tower appeared on the ridge like it had always been part of the mountain, even though I was certain it hadn't been there before. It rose from the rock in a straight, unnatural line, metal ribs fading into mist at the top where the sky seemed to lose focus. The air around it vibrated faintly. Not sound, not wind, something between thought and pressure. I stepped closer. My head felt heavier with every step, like clarity itself was being pulled apart. The tower emitted a pulse at irregular intervals, each one landing inside my mind like a quiet interruption. A thought disappeared. Then another. I tried to hold on to my memories, but they began slipping between pulses. The more I stood near it, the less certain I became of what I had already done. I remembered climbing routes I hadn't taken, paths I didn't recognize, moments that felt real but belonged to someone else or something else. The tower didn't speak, but it corrected. Each pulse removed something small from me, replacing it with something unfamiliar but convincing enough to accept. I stepped back quickly. The pulses followed. Inside my head, not weaker with distance, stronger, as if I had already been recorded here long before I arrived. The sky changed too fast to understand. One moment, pale afternoon light covered the mountain. The next, darkness felt like a curtain dropping mid-thought. No transition, no fading, just night arriving early, as if time had been interrupted and forced into silence. The temperature dropped instantly. The world shifted into unfamiliar quiet. Stars appeared overhead, but their patterns felt wrong. They didn't resemble constellations I knew. Instead, they traced shapes that looked like my own movement through the mountain. I stopped walking. The stars stopped shifting. I moved again. They followed. Night sounds emerged, but they didn't belong to the present. Footsteps I had already taken echoed faintly through the air. Breathing I hadn't made yet drifted between trees. Time felt unstable, like it was looping in uneven fragments. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or replaying something already completed. The trail beneath me stretched and collapsed in subtle cycles, never fully consistent. I looked up again. The sky seemed to blink, and for a moment, I saw daylight trapped behind the darkness. The trail narrowed again near a ridge where fog clung low to ground. That's when I saw him, standing ahead, still, facing away at first. Something about his posture made my breath tighten immediately. It was familiar in a way that didn't belong. Then he turned slightly, and I saw my own face. Exact, but not. He looked like me, but moved like someone who understood the mountain better than I did. Confident, controlled, certain in ways I wasn't. I stepped forward slowly. He didn't react. Then he vanished into the fog. No sound, no trace, just absence. I froze. The forest stayed still, but my camera in my pocket vibrated faintly. I pulled it out. The screen showed footage of the trail, but I wasn't the one walking in it. He was the stranger, wearing my body like it belonged to him. I rewound. Same result. Every recording showed him instead of me. My hands started shaking, because if the camera was right, then I was the wrong version. The terrain shifted beneath my feet as I climbed higher, not in obvious ways, but in subtle adjustments that became impossible to ignore. Rocks changed position slightly when I looked away. Paths widened when I hesitated, narrowed when I doubted. At first, I thought it was imagination. Then it responded to me directly. When I felt fear, the cliffs closed in slightly, guiding me into tighter paths. When I felt curiosity, openings appeared where there had been none before. The mountain was reacting to emotion itself, shaping itself around my internal state. I stopped walking. The world paused with me. Even the wind felt like it was waiting for input. I stepped forward again slowly. A new path formed instantly ahead, smooth and deliberate, not natural, intentional. It felt like I wasn't climbing a mountain anymore. I was interacting with something that understood me, something that adjusted itself based on what I was. The realization settled slowly. This wasn't terrain. It was response. And I wasn't lost. I was being guided. The higher I climbed, the less the mountain felt like stone and earth. The surface under my boots shifted in small ways, like it was listening through pressure. A loose rock would settle only after I looked at it. A narrow path would open just enough when I hesitated, then tighten again when I felt unsure. It was not random. It was reaction. I stopped near a ridge where the wind should have been strongest, but it wasn't. The air here waited instead of moving. Even the clouds above seemed paused, holding position like they were watching something unfold below. I lifted my foot slowly. A path formed ahead. Smooth, clear, direct. I lowered it again. The path softened, edges blurring into uneven stone. My breath slowed. The mountain was responding to me, not my movement, my intention. I turned slightly, testing it. A narrow cliff edge widened behind me, as if offering safety I hadn't asked for. My chest tightened. This wasn't navigation. It was interpretation. The mountain wasn't guiding me. It was correcting me. And I didn't know what it thought I was supposed to become. Night settled early in the valley between peaks, though I didn't remember the sun fully setting. A fire appeared where I stopped, already alive, already steady. No wood crackling into flame. No ignition moment. Just heat existing as if it had always been there. I stepped closer. The fire did not flicker away. It steadied around my presence. Flames moved softly upward, too smooth to be natural, like they were remembering how fire should behave rather than actually burning. I crouched near it. Warmth touched my face. Inside the glow, shapes formed briefly. Not images. Memories. My memories. But placed wrong, like someone had rearranged them while I wasn't looking. I saw conversations I didn't remember having. A place I had never visited. A version of myself speaking calmly to someone I could not see. When I blinked, the images changed. The fire was not consuming anything. It was revealing. I tried to step away. The warmth followed. Not physically, emotionally, like the fire knew what I had tried to forget, and refused to let it stay hidden. The trail stretched forward through narrow stone corridors and patches of fog that never fully cleared. But something was wrong with distance itself. Every time I moved forward, the space behind me changed. I looked back once. The path I had just walked was gone. Not hidden, not blocked, removed. Only untouched wilderness remained where my steps should have been. I turned fully. Nothing. No trace of movement. No evidence I had passed through at all. I walked again. Faster, then slower. The result stayed the same. The mountain was erasing my history. Each step forward felt like the only proof I existed at all. I tried to mark the ground with a stone. When I turned around, the stone was gone. The forest felt continuous, seamless, like it had never been interrupted by me. Forward remained. Backward did not. And slowly I realized something worse. If nothing remained behind me, then nothing to confirm I had ever been anywhere before this moment. The rocks began to hum before I realized anything had changed. A low vibration ran through the ground, subtle enough to feel like imagination at first. But it didn't stop. It gathered. I placed my hand on a stone wall beside the trail. It was warm, not from sunlight, from something inside it. A voice formed through the vibration, not spoken, constructed. It sounded like my own thoughts being rearranged into speech. It asked a question I didn't understand at first. Then again, clearer, more direct. Something about choices I had already made. I stepped back quickly. The voice followed through the rock, expanding into surrounding stone, as if the mountain itself was learning how to ask me things. Every answer I didn't give seemed to change the terrain slightly. Paths shifted, stones adjusted, distance remeasured itself. The mountain wasn't waiting for my response. It was building one without me, and I was the missing piece it kept trying to calculate. The cave appeared naturally at first glance. Carved into mountain like erosion had shaped it over centuries. But the moment I stepped inside, the air changed. The wind didn't stop here. It reorganized. It moved in slow, steady patterns, like breathing, controlled, intentional. The shelter was warmer than outside, but not safe. The warmth felt observational, like it was measuring how I reacted to comfort. Shadows moved along the walls. Even when nothing moved, I froze. The shadows froze a fraction later, then corrected themselves. Footsteps circled me from outside the cave. Slow, even, but when I turned, there was nothing, only silence shaped like movement. I stepped back toward the entrance. The wind shifted direction instantly, blocking, not forcefully, deliberately. The cave didn't trap me. It was paying attention, and I was the only thing inside it worth listening to. The final climb was steep enough that breathing became a constant negotiation with the air. The higher I went, the quieter the world became, until even my footsteps felt like interruptions in something far older than silence. When I reached the summit, the sky felt too close, too aware, and that's when I saw him. A figure sat near the edge, facing away from me. Still, perfectly still. I stopped climbing. He didn't turn. The wind moved around him differently, as if avoiding contact. I took one careful step forward. The distance between us did not change. I stepped again. Still the same. It felt like the space itself refused to reduce, like I was not permitted to approach him. Then, slowly, he lifted his arm. Not toward me, just slightly, and copied my movement. I hadn't moved yet. My hand was still at my side, but his arm matched something I was about to do. Before I did it, my breath caught. I tried again. He mirrored it again, always one step ahead of me, or behind something I hadn't become yet. I couldn't tell. The figure remained facing away, but I understood something without seeing his face. He had been here longer than the mountain had been called a mountain, and he was waiting for something that kept arriving incorrectly. Me, the map should have been useless by now, but I kept it anyway. Paper worn thin, edges softened by sweat and fog. Every time I unfolded it, the mountain around me felt slightly more organized, like the land was trying to match what the paper believed. But then the ink began to move, slowly at first, lines shifting in reverse. Paths I hadn't taken appeared first, before the ones I had. I watched as the map rewrote itself backward, not predicting forward movement, reconstructing what should have already happened. My breath slowed. I hadn't even reached certain places yet, but the map showed them behind me, completed, finalized, sealed in ink-like memory that belonged to someone else. I turned it upside down. The result didn't change. The mountain ahead felt suddenly less important than what the map insisted I had already survived. Then new lines appeared, faster, more confident. They did not follow my route. They defined it, as if I was only tracing something already decided. I folded the map. When I opened it again, it showed me standing somewhere I had not yet reached, waiting for myself. The stone circle was hidden just off the trail, arranged too evenly to be natural. Ancient rocks stood in a wide ring, each one smooth in places that should have been rough. The air inside felt measured, like even silence had rules here. I stepped into it without meaning to. A soft chime rang out, not from anywhere visible, from the stones themselves. I froze. The sound came again, one chime per step. I tested it slowly. Step, chime, step, chime. But then I noticed something wrong. The number of chimes matched my heartbeat, not my steps, my pulse. I placed my hand on my chest. The stones responded instantly. The chimes aligned tighter, like they were correcting rhythm, not observing it. I tried to step out of the circle. The chimes increased, faster, louder, until I stopped moving. Then silence returned. But it didn't feel like rest. It felt like being recorded, measured, stored, like the circle wasn't watching where I went. It was calculating what I was made of. The fog returned thicker than before, rolling through the trees like something searching rather than drifting. It didn't just cover the land. It pressed against it, shaping itself around branches and stones as if memorizing their forms. Then it spoke, not as sound, as recognition. Names began forming inside the mist. At first, I thought it was random. Then I recognized one, someone I had not thought about in years. The fog repeated it softly. Then another name, one I had forgotten I ever knew. Each name carried weight, memory attached to it. Even when I couldn't fully retrieve what it meant, I stepped backward. The fog followed, not quickly, patiently, like it was building something out of everything I had ever known. Then it said my name, not once, but in different voices, different tones, different versions, each one slightly wrong. The fog thickened when I hesitated, as if uncertainty made it stronger. I tried to leave the clearing. The names followed, sticking to the air behind me like residue. It wasn't just recalling who I was. It was constructing a version of me from everything I had ever forgotten. I expected the descent to feel easier. It didn't. The path downward looked clear at first, sloping gently between rock formations and loose soil. But every step I took made the world feel less certain. Gravity seemed inconsistent, shifting slightly as if the mountain was reconsidering direction. I kept walking. Down became sideways, then forward again, then up. I stopped. The path did not. It continued, looping back into itself without visible transition. I tried again. Same result. Each descent returned me higher than before. The mountain refused the concept of leaving, not by blocking me, by reordering space. My breathing grew uneven. I turned back. The place I came from was no longer behind me. It was above me, or below, or both. I couldn't tell anymore. Every direction folded into the same outcome. No exit, only continuation. The idea of down stopped making sense entirely. And slowly I understood. The mountain wasn't trapping me. It was correcting the idea that I could leave it all. The final ridge opened without ceremony. No dramatic shift. No sudden clarity. Just a widening of stone and fog that felt less like arrival and more like exposure. I stepped forward and saw myself. At first, I thought it was reflection, but the figure was too solid, too separate, standing at the ridge ahead, facing the same direction I had just come from. He was me, but not the me that was standing here now. He was arriving, again, from the trail below. I watched as he climbed, slow, careful, unaware. Then he paused, as if sensing something he couldn't name. I stepped back instinctively. Behind me, another version stood on the path, already halfway through climb. I turned. There were more, some close, some distant, some noticing me, most not. The mountain was filled with them, versions of the same journey layered over each other, like overlapping echoes that never fully separated, each one slightly different, each one repeating the climb as if it had never been done before. I tried to speak. No sound came out. One of them looked at me, then looked away, like I wasn't part of his version of the story. That's when I understood. I wasn't the first. I wasn't the last. I wasn't even unique. I was just one repetition inside something that never stopped repeating. The mountain didn't end at the summit. It only looped back into itself. And somewhere in that endless cycle, I would always be arriving,